And welcome to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show on the SBT Magazine Radio Network. And we're back again for another week. I'm Steve Levine. I'm Executive Publisher of Small Business Today Magazine.
I'm Barbara Davis Levine, Associate Publisher, Creative Director, Editor, and whatever of Small Business Today Magazine.
All those things.
All those things.
And we do this show in tandem with the magazine. Small Business Today Magazine was designed to help aspiring entrepreneurs and small business owners achieve their dreams of big business success. We do that both with a beautiful hard copy and a digital edition with a combined audience of over 95,000 readers worldwide. Even though it's designed specifically to assist the small business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs in Houston, it has become an international must-read where we have subscribers on every continent. Everything from somebody with a pickup truck and a tool belt to multi-billionaires who read it cover to cover.
And college students even that are just...
College students, youthpreneurs, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned
businesses. They had
business.
Golden parachutes and found they had a hole in it.
That's right. By far, small business is the nation's largest employer collectively. And that being small business of 500 employees or less, and most of those are 100 employees or less. And collectively, small business pays the largest amount of taxes collectively. And it was the small business that our nation's economy was founded on. You know, shopkeepers, street merchants, craftsmen, and farmers.
Let's talk about the magazine real quick.
Let's talk about the magazine.
You can get a copy for sbtmagazine.net or smallbusinessmagazine.com.
And you still get a digital copy, I think, till the first of the year. We're going to extend
At least.
Yes.
And the showcase is about a local success story.
That's right.
That has started with nothing and built something. But every one of the cover honorees have something in common is they give back. And they're more concerned about giving back than taking, and that's what sets them apart and makes them a successful business owner. And
we were talking before the show started, there is a direct correlation between one's generosity and their success. When you bless others, so you are blessed. Maybe in not direct proportion, maybe not immediately, but still there are blessings. And that's what we found when we select a cover honoree by nomination by one of our advisory board members and a unanimous vote by the 10 or 12 that we select to vote on that individual.
Right.
And there are people turned down.
That's right. And they can't pay to be on the cover. It's something that's strictly...
No, you can't buy your way on there.
So. And also every story ends with words of advice, best words of advice. Exactly.
I think that's the most sought after page in the magazine, the first go-to page. You'd think it'd be the one with my picture, but it's not. Where we ask the entrepreneur what their secret of success is, what best practices, words of advice. If you had taken them out for a steak and lobster dinner.
Or maybe just a Jack in the Box.
Or whatever. And ask for their best words of advice, this is what they tell you. And what's a clue look like?
If you see the same answers in multiple back issues, go to the archives, and you start seeing something repeated, like being best friends with your banker, or just giving back the community. Those certain things are repeated over and over again. Then you know you want to put an asterisk. I say make a compendium of all the best words of advice at all the back archives of our magazines.
There are currently 40 individual entrepreneurs on our website that we've done cover stories on. We skipped June because of the flood, and we came out with June. July was really a July issue. But there are 40 success stories to be had and takeaway notes on all. And they all have that generosity factor. Again, you get a complimentary digital subscription for free, or you can get a subscription to the hard copy, which is that
$69 a year.
Exactly. So that's the magazine in a nutshell. Great articles, great content, 6 mistakes that startup entrepreneurs make, 4 drastic measures to turn your business around now, what's the SBA really looking for, can you use an SBA loan to buy real estate, what happens when your bank says no. We
all of those
amazing content.
Great columns, and I said we have about 45 submissions every month. We only take about 25, and I edit them to make sure there's no infomercials in them. They have to be strictly about what's going to be benefiting the reader. And so that's why we've got such wonderful writers and great stories that people are building their business from.
And we have success stories and testimonials. Somebody said they, after being downsized by corporate America, they restart their own business after 40 years in corporate America. by utilizing the information in our magazine. I think that's powerful. College students who say have already figured out that corporate America does not offer you security anymore. It used to be get a good education, go to a good college, get a good education and a good job with a good company, and that company will take care of you, and not anymore. There's no one who's doesn't run the risk of being downsized in our economy. It depends on which way the wind blows, but we have a publication help everything youthpreneurs and veteranpreneurs and women-owned businesses and
minority business owners.
Exactly. So now the radio show, which you're listening to, either audio or maybe you're watching the YouTube video put together by Ronald Coleman, moviewhip.com.
Well, that'll be the next one. This will go out on YouTube in a couple of days.
Runs in conjunction with the magazine. We like to bring on people from the publication, clients, writers, people you should know about, companies doing amazing things, and that's why we have these two gentlemen here. Right, Barbara?
Absolutely.
Yes. And Zaid Sultan, we met through the Houston Metropolitan Chamber, and he is the president or chairman? Chairman of the chamber. What an amazing organization. Aren't they great, Barbara? We've feature articles on a lot of chambers,
but I think you've got a lot of heavy hitters in this one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and a great
Thank you very
personality, and I don't know, it's almost like a culture. It's like a chamber culture of a lot of fun and a lot of business.
Yeah.
And they take both very seriously. So started out Bel Air Chamber and now in Greenway Plaza.
It's everything.
So we're doing a feature article in October.
Yes.
Is that going to come out on time?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Got the photo shoot done, got the interview done.
Yeah,
so.
we just finished the photo shoot today.
Exactly. But we are with these two gentlemen, Mr. Brett
Shadbolt. Is that correct?
That's
Yes,
right.
that's correct. Thank you.
And Zaid Sultan, and they were with Censere, and we're talking about their business. And Brett, you came in from where? Where you?
I came in from Hong Kong, so I'm based in HongOng.
See, I only drove from Ireland. I thought that was pretty far. But,
It's a long swim from Hong Kong.
It is. And how long are you in town for?
I'm here for the week. We're actually co-sponsoring a conference here on anti-corruption in the oil and gas industry, so we're here for a couple of days for that. And then we have our official launch party actually on Thursday night.
Zaid, you want to tell us a little about Brett?
Well, he's my boss.
That's plenty right there. Okay. And what's been your background prior to starting this company?
Well, I started in New Zealand, which is my home country.
You didn't have a Texas accent. I was pretty sure of that.
Indeed, not a Texas accent.
Right, Barbara?
I thought it was from Louisiana.
No, I started in New Zealand 30 years ago in valuation, appraisal. And essentially, I've been in that industry pretty much all of my career. So my background is valuation of businesses, valuation of intellectual property. And the firm has expanded into forensic accounting and investigations in the last 12 months or so. And I started Censere about 13 years ago together with my wife. And the US is a new initiative for us. We opened here roughly 12 months ago.
And you're in the Williams Tower, yeah?
Correct, yes.
All right. And Zaid, how did you learn of Censere?
Well, really, the story of me coming to Censere is the power of networking and staying in touch with older colleagues that you've worked across. And I maintain a very personal relationship with one of the partners I used to work with at Deloitte back.
Okay.
And I spent most of my career in the Big Four, mainly with Deloitte. Very good friend of mine and gentleman I worked for, it was Peter Coleman, who was in Singapore at the time and subsequently had relocated to Jakarta. He was leaving Deloitte around a year ago and joining up with Brett. And we stayed in touch, and subsequently the opportunity for opening a U.S. presence came about earlier this year. And Brett and I were introduced about a year ago this time, because they had come over for this conference, and I was with another firm at the time. And Peter and I had worked together on some large scale projects at Deloitte, and so because of that, the synergy continued, and here I am.
We were going to get more into that. We've got to take a little
got
break.
a whole host of questions.
I know,
to
we've got
ask.
tons
I know,
of
I got
questions
tons of
to ask.
But she always asks the ones I want to ask. I don't know why.
Oh, that's all right.
Anyway,
But we'll be right back after these messages, and you're listening to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show
on the SBT Magazine Radio Network.
At Affordable Searches, our mission is to provide our customers with the most thorough background check possible to protect you, your employees, and also your business. We do so by contracting with companies across the country that provide us with the best information possible and in a quick turnaround time. Our turnaround times average anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. Our pricing is very competitive, and we are always here for you. We're always here to answer any questions you have. Please give us a call at 1-877-685-6691, and we'll be glad to answer each and every question that you have.
And welcome back to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show
On the SBT Magazine Radio Network.
By Joe, I think they've got it.
I think so.
It's the third
Do
time,
tell.
so that's good. Anyway.
I think you got some smart men over here. I don't think there's any question.
Very smart man. Very smart man. And we were with Mr. Brett Shadbolt, came from Hong Kong for special meetings in Texas, which is a new initiative for Censere, and Mr. Zaid Sultan, who we know from the Houston Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. We're doing a feature article on.
Right.
And we're going to delve more into their business and
what
why
Sincere
they
is.
opened here.
Yeah, why they opened here. Exactly.
Yep.
I have a question about the name, Sincere.
Yes.
How did you, it sounds like so sincere, like SINCERE, but it's spelled CEN.
Correct.
Then SERE. Tell me about the name.
Well, it's a bit of a play on words, I guess, in that regard. Actually, I noticed you have an article on business names in the August edition. So, obviously, when I wanted to start the business, one of the first things you need to do is decide on a business name. And I didn't want to call it Shadbolt and Company, mainly because I didn't really want it to be just about me, and also that name was taken.
That's another good reason.
That's another good reason.
A little intellectual
Exactly.
property gets in the way. Yeah.
It does occasionally. And I was trying to sort of cast around and decide exactly what we're going to call ourselves. And I thought, well, Latin sounds quite intellectual. It sounds sort of, it sounds good. So I hit the online English, Latin dictionaries, punched in a few keywords. And our main services are around appraisal or valuation, advisory services for clients, and we assist our clients basically to complete transactions. So I punched in appraise, assist, advise, and one of the Latin words that came up amongst a number of others was censere. The pronunciation would be censere in Latin. Now, I'm not a Latin scholar, so I naturally pronounce it sincere.
Right.
And is that kind of like a consigliere or the Italian?
I guess it probably comes from the same root. Again, not being a Latin scholar or an Italian linguist, I'm not certain. I know it comes from the same root as census, which is to measure.
Right.
So that's a lot of what we do.
And I think a
measuring the value.
consigliere is like more of a business role manager.
Right. So that was one of the Latin words that got thrown out by my search. So the next thing I did, of course, in this connected age is do a whois look up on Censere.com and the other keywords to see what's available. And by chance, Censere.com had been registered by someone and they'd let it go. It was available. So I immediately bought the domain name, and that was our company name. And here was I thinking it was going to take us weeks to try and decide a name, and the whole process took me less than 20 minutes.
Excellent.
And sincere, as you say, it's a little bit of a play on words. We are sincere about being sincere.
I like that. I think it's always good to have some kind of a little hook that ties in with who you are.
And the tagline for Censere that we have on our stationery, name cards and what have you is analyse, appraise, assist, advise, which is essentially the keywords that I put into to find the name.
Find the name. That's great.
And it definitely relates to what we do.
Well, you get an A for
we get 4 A's.
Exactly.
And you started the company when, Brent?
We started the company in July 2002, so 13 years ago.
Okay.
And so, where you started was in what? Where did you start specifically?
In Hong Kong.
In Hong Kong.
So we were living in Hong Kong at the time. I moved to Hong Kong in '93, so we've been living there now for about 22 years with my wife, and we just decided it was time to do something for ourselves. I'd been working for a number of other companies, and sort of, they're good, but there's also frustrations. And I sort of thought, right, I'm sure I can do better. And essentially, what we wanted to do was actually work with our clients across the whole of Asia. My role has always been I guess a regional role, and the firms I've worked with have struggled perhaps in providing these services across the whole of Asia as a region. Often we had offices in multiple countries, but the shareholding of each office might have been different. So instead of being able to go out and basically contact the other offices and say, okay, our client needs us to do this, I spent half my time negotiating with our own offices in Singapore or China or somewhere else to try and sort of get them to focus on what the client wanted us to do. And I just got tired of that.
Imagine so.
If I can't do it in the firm I'm in, I'm just going to have to set up my own firm. So Censere was born, and we have a single platform now across 15 locations in Asia and the US.
I saw something in Seoul. There was a list of...
Oh, we're not everywhere, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Singapore, Auckland, Bangkok, Beijing, Hong Kong, Houston, of course, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Maldives, Seoul, Shanghai, Sydney, Taipei, Tokyo, and Washington, D.C.
Indeed.
How did you come to choose Houston?
Well, I think Zaid sort of touched on that just before the last break. It was a relationship with that Zaid had or still has with one of our other directors based in our Jakarta office. They both worked together in a prior life. And I met Zaid personally roughly this time last year at the conference which we're attending this week. And we were exploring opportunities to collaborate between Censere and the firm that Zed was working for at the time. And working towards that collaboration when I think his firm got sidetracked by a very large contract in Europe. And we're deploying all their available resources to Europe, and said to Zed, right, well, we want you to go to France. And well, he's got a wife and he's got a family. They quite like it here in Houston.
They kind of like it.
And he decided perhaps not to do that. And so the discussions we were having sort of took on a different flavour. And ultimately we decided that it would be good for both of us perhaps if he joined Censere. And we hadn't initially thought about opening offices in the US, but it's actually been a very, very interesting move. So... that's what sort of brought the Houston opening and also the Washington D.C. opening about was really the personal relationships, and our business is very much around personal relationships.
We might be kind of biased, but we think that Houston's some of the most fertile ground to establish a business of when you have credibility and you do what you say you're going to do.
Right.
Very inviting and but if you're not, then it doesn't go very far.
Right.
But there are more startups here in Houston than anywhere in the U.S.
Well, I've learnt that since we sort of made the decision to open here, and it's been a good move. And we're also quite strong in terms of the energy sector as well, so it was a bit of a natural fit in that regard. Right. We do a lot of energy work across, obviously, in Indonesia and China and elsewhere. So we have some clients who obviously have a presence here in Houston and work for a number of U.S. companies with operations in Asia. So it was a very good fit all round, actually.
I know there's some questions I have about the you said accounting forensics and different. We'll get back to that. We're kind of running short on time. How can someone reach your company?
Well, the easiest way would be censere.com. So www.censere.com.
Excellent. And what about, is there any local communication? If people listening in Houston, you want to say anything?
Your home phone number, Zed, was...
No, we have all of the information on our website. Also, for those who are listening, Censere is an active member and a proud member of the Houston Metropolitan Chamber.
Absolutely. I was hoping you'd mention that. I was going to do that again.
We are on their contact list as well. So we're very easy to get in touch with, so you'll be able to find us.
We'll be back. We'll be right back with Brett and Zed with Censere in just a few moments after these messages. And you're listening to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show on the SBT Magazine Radio Network.
Sure, you could choose the name everyone's heard of. And yes, they'll tell you they can do everything you want. But what they won't tell you is how difficult it will be for you to hook all the pieces together and keep them working for your business. If you're looking for a great project for your IT team, to learn all about their technology and stay busy keeping things working for your sales team, then they have a great solution. If you're looking for something that will enable your sales team to sell more and will just work without hassles and your staff spending time maintaining it, then you might want to consider Sales Nexus. Normally, the CRM is the core system. Email marketing is an add-on. Access to new contacts is an add-on. Help setting things up requires a certified consultant to engage with your company separately. Help with integration requires plugins, add-ons, and programming consultants to make it all work. Same-day support is an additional charge. This means that your email marketing data is not in the same place as your CRM and sales data. Your team has to move things back and forth and clean up lists manually, and things just aren't real time. Having all these things working seamlessly, all at the fingertips of your sales team, lets you spend your time communicating with leads, prospects, new customers, past customers, and other audiences automatically. All the while, your team is alerted to take action when the time is right for each individual customer. No, it's not too good to be true. The industry's most responsive support is available to everyone at no additional cost, and Sales Nexus works directly with your team to customize the solution to your needs and integrate with other systems critical to your business. Oh, and by the way, it's going to cost less, not more.
And welcome back to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show
on the SBT Magazine Radio Network.
And Barbara and I enjoy doing this show. We get to meet some really great people, entrepreneurs and people that assist entrepreneurs and affiliates. And this one is courtesy of the Houston Metropolitan Chamber. Had we not offered to do an article on the chamber, we would have met Zed
and Brett, right?
With Censere, so
right. And we're speaking to Brett Shadbolt and Zed, founder of Censere, and then
CEO,
and then we have, of course, Zaid Sultan, that is the Houston. What's your title?
I'm the director of the Houston and Washington D.C.
Wow. Now, you were talking earlier about the background and what y'all do, and you're talking about accounting forensics. Could you elaborate, give an example of what you've come into a company and what do you provide when you do that for them?
Well, there's a fairly broad range of instances where we'd be perhaps brought into play. One of the low-hanging fruit and a situation where we're involved in frequently would be assisting companies, US companies, in or across Asia, to ensure that they comply with FCPA. So FCPA is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It's a US-specific law, and it relates specifically to corruption, fraud and corruption committed by US companies or US reporting firms outside of the US. It's been said that corruption is reasonably common in Asia. That may or may not be the case. I guess we can't say anything one way or the other, but it's certainly an issue everywhere in the world. No one country is corruption-free. Trying to ensure that firms, US firms, don't run afoul of FCPA it's a very difficult job because Asia is a very fragmented region. You've got different cultures, different languages, different practices. And one thing I think that most people don't realize is when you think of ethics and you sort of think of a code of ethics and what is moral and what is not, you tend to look at that from your own personal perspective.
I was going to say, isn't that ethnocentric?
Exactly. So, you know...
I was going to throw that word in, too.
It's a great word. I like that. I'm going to borrow that next time.
Certainly.
So most people will always look at it from their own personal perspective, whether it's ethnocentric or culture-centric, I guess. But that's not the case, and that's certainly what we find on a regular basis, is that working across Asia, and this isn't unique to Asia, I'm sure it happens in other regions as well, but every country, every culture has a slightly different take on what is considered to be ethical or honourable or moral. And something that may not be considered acceptable in the US can be perfectly moral or correct in another country. So that's interesting for US firms operating in some of these regions where they've got staff perhaps out there doing business development, dealing with clients, customers, regulatory authorities, suppliers, and they may not even understand that what they're doing is not permitted in a US context. So FCPA is an interesting piece of legislation. It's I think it was probably the first piece of legislation which had global reach through. Yeah. So typically what happens is if you commit something, you commit an offence somewhere which is against the law, you may be prosecuted in the country where that offence has occurred. So FCPA was the first law where the US authorities will prosecute a firm for doing something outside the US borders.
What does FCPA stand for?
The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Thank you.
So it means that you may have an office in Indonesia.
Okay, I would say Kathmandu.
Kathmandu. We don't have an office there, so not yet.
Okay.
We're growing, but not yet. But perhaps you've got operations in Jakarta, and certainly oil and gas industry. There's a lot of activity in Indonesia, so it is one that we come across frequently. Your employees there are held to the same standards as employees here in the US, but as I say, their appreciation of what's correct or incorrect, what's moral, what's immoral, basically what's honest, what's dishonest, and all of these different phrases can be very different. And I guess coming back to what we do, one of the things we do is help companies to set up and roll out their FCPA plan to ensure that they are compliant with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Then there's ongoing, perhaps, reviews related to that to ensure that system has been properly implemented and things are running according to plan. Then I guess sort of one of the more negative aspects of that would be that if there's a whistleblowing event or there's a trigger event, they find that there's money gone missing or there's some allegations of impropriety, that we would perhaps be brought in to conduct an investigation to find out what the circumstances were. One of the unique features of FCPA is that if the company self-reports an issue to the authorities here in the US, they may be able to mitigate any potential penalties. So it's in the interest of companies here in the US to actively get on top of FCPA measures. If they're not aware of it and a third party or a whistleblower gets involved and it's reported back to the authorities, the penalties can be that much more. And another feature of FCPA is that if someone does blow the whistle on you, they get a percentage of any fines that might be imposed.
So there's motivation, there's incentive.
There's a financial motivation there for someone to actually go to the authorities and highlight any impropriety or wrongdoing. So companies have to stay on top of this.
Let's turn the table. Your company, do you do business or help people doing business in Russia?
We don't. We're very much in Asia.
Asian.
That, I guess for us, doesn't include Russia at this point.
Well, because, I had a family member that did business in Russia, did everything, and their Russian mafia came with their things and said, you leave or we kill you, and took over his business. And so how does one protect oneself from going to a foreign country, and somebody coming and using inappropriate measures? How does the FCPA protect them in the countries you deal with?
I don't know that FCPA would protect them from that necessarily. in some ways it can make life more difficult having to operate in a country where that appreciation for, I guess, what's right, what's wrong, or as I say, a different take on fraud and corruption. FCPA can impose a higher standard, which can actually make it more difficult to operate.
Well, I would say this on that example. What those mafia members that you were talking about would probably want is a bribe.
Right.
So that they would leave your relative alone.
Yep.
And the FCPA prohibits any company publicly traded in the United States to have bribes within the country that they're operating.
Right.
However, in that case, let's say your family member was actually a multinational company, they have to go through an internal risk assessment process. So when they do that due diligence of the country that they're doing work in, things like the mafia or the oligarchs would control the industries would come up, and then decision makers will have to make the overall decision, is this worth the risk going in? So for instance, in Russia, it's a very strong energy market or oil and gas market. So the return on an investment may be greater than the risk to take to go into that country.
Yep.
But it's important, what Brett was touching upon is the internal compliance for the companies to go through to do a comprehensive risk assessment in the country that they're doing, and then to also provide the appropriate training to the employees in the country not to bribe people.
Exactly.
And that's what they have to do. And our firm provides that sort of advice, that sort of a training. We go through and do a comprehensive compliance review of the country's program. We had just finished up a project this summer for an American company doing their entire compliance review in China. And we highlighted weaknesses within their compliance program, and that is presented towards those appropriate departments so that they either increase it or hire us to help them implement that. But I think your example is more lens towards the due diligence a company needs to do prior to going into that country. And so,
exactly.
When we're talking about,
I wouldn't do business there right now.
Well, when we're talking about Russia is always one of the top countries that the risk is very high because they don't. It's controlled by a certain segment of the population that maybe have ties to mafia or oligarchs. Because they're controlling those.
The power is very concentrated.
Right.
But that goes to another service which I was going to touch on. I mean, FCPA we've sort of discussed. But doing the background due diligence, looking at the sovereign risk and conducting due diligence on perhaps partners that you might be working with or potential acquisition targets and the people behind those businesses is another aspect of the services we provide.
Excellent. That's great.
And then also when you go into a country like Russia or China, you tend to have in-country partners. So what they call joint ventures. And it's really important to keep in compliance with the FCPA that the partner that you are working with is free of those type of risks that we were just talking about, whether they have ties with the current government, because that could be perceived as bribing foreign officials, which is a no-no in the FCPA, or if they're just shady operations.
Is it more, I got a question, is it more practices in the U.S. that would not be acceptable in these other countries, or is it more the other way around?
Well, I guess you can look at it from both directions. I mean, if one of the practices in the U.S. is not to bribe local officials, then that's a practice which
I think is not kosher here either.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a practice in the U.S. not to bribe local officials. Well, that's a practice in some countries which is not acceptable because
they call that contributions.
Right.
Campaign.
I would say fundraising and lobbying is how we describe bribing in the U.S.
Whereas in some countries, I guess paying call it a bribe or calling some sort of inducement to officials to do something is the way business is done.
Right.
So yes, I guess there are, that's a practice which is common in the US, i.e. not to bribe people, but which is not so acceptable. I'm turning things on the head a little bit.
Also, I think it's important
Is there
to note
anything else that he's wanting?
Well, like gift giving, for instance. It's in Asian society, it's very
common.
acceptable to give gifts to your clients or your business partners.
Yep.
You have to be very careful of that here in the United States, that it's not above a certain financial threshold.
Right.
So it's perceived to be any sort of of a bribe.
This would be also another interesting topic in the magazine, consistent with Mila Golovine with Masterword Services, collecting language and people, as she does articles every month on
how to do business,
doing business with or networking with other cultures. And she's an expert on that, all within 600 words. But this is really what to be careful of.
Right.
You know, so.
And look, it's not like you have to just cut off all having fun and taking people out, but you just have to be cognizant of the risk and the perception. And so
and the value, understand how much you are spending.
In a comprehensive FCPA compliance program, that will all be addressed. In other words, if you are dining out with people, make sure you are not exceeding a certain threshold. You're going to it's dinner, and that's really it, not something like more lavish than that, or gifts like not $700, $800 bottles of wine. I mean, you just have to be reasonable when you're doing this, because if you cut it away, then we've
got some firms who won't even accept a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You can't buy someone a cup of coffee because they simply won't accept it.
And that's actually barbers by company is quite acceptable to do lavish things for us. We set that bar very high.
Well, it should be.
I like beluga. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it should be noted that if you are doing work with the United States federal government, all these restrictions apply. Where if you have a meeting with the government officials, they're not allowed to just take your free coffee or the water that you give them. They actually have to pay for it. So
now the soda water that you provided us at the beginning of the show, that's not an inducement, I take it. we are
not so far. No. We'll have to see how the show goes.
Right. I wanted to talk about you are representing both Washington, D.C. and Texas. Is a big, vast region between. But tell me about what your capacity and how you're dealing with it. You're doing more, because, again, you're into the fraud and background. Can we elaborate more about that?
I spent pretty much my entire professional career in Washington, D.C. I've actually only been in Houston for a little over a year now. And so my network, my background is all from D.C. When I was with the Big Four, we worked exclusively with law firms based out of Washington, D.C. And New York City. So that Northeast corridor is very familiar with me. When we came for the business plan for Censere, it made perfect sense to have a presence in Washington, D.C., because when we look into the FCPA violations, much of the work is coming down from attorneys that are based in the D.C. area. Plus, the Department of Justice is in Washington, D.C., the SEC is in Washington, D.C., so the thought leadership in the FCPA world is concentrated in Washington. Even if it's an oil and gas violation, that's the prosecution or the investigations are coming out of the D.C.
The attorneys, you said, there are a lot of...
And also, D.C. being the capital of the United States, it has the global reach inherently. So we can operate in Asia very effectively. There's a lot, obviously the embassies are there. And so New York is a train ride away, so we can service out of there. And I think between what Brett and I want to do in the next year or two, we want to be in that market at some point, New York, and then obviously in San Francisco. Now, Houston made the industry sense because we have such a vast expertise and knowledge in the oil and gas world. Obviously being in Indonesia is one of the largest oil-producing countries in the world. And China with its energy need.
We're doing
Malaysia.
more in Mongolia.
Is that predominantly Asia? Your business in Asia is around the energy?
Natural
not
resources.
solely. We do a lot around minerals, oil, and gas, but we cover a number of other industries as well. But certainly the energy sector is quite a significant slice of the business.
Do you ever get involved in manufacturing, like clothing?
Oh, we do. We're within reason sector agnostic. We cover pretty much every sector.
High tech as well.
High tech manufacturing, minerals, oil and gas, heavy industry, so steel making, and a lot of infrastructure work around sort of road, rail projects, power generation, water treatment. A lot in hospitality and leisure, and there's a lot of opportunities for fraud and corruption in pretty much every sector. So pharmaceutical is another area, or life science is another sector that we're very active in. So Asia is booming in all of these sectors.
And when you say hospitality leisure, like my cousin, by the way, it was a casino that was already...
Gaming, definitely. There's a lot of opportunity for corruption in gaming, but generally in terms of operating restaurants and hotels and resorts and that sort of thing. So the procurement manager might order beluga, for instance, and pay for beluga, but receive something of significantly lower quality.
Etc.
Yep. Or they may perhaps charge a client for beluga and provide them something of a lower quality. There's opportunities there for people to substitute products of different standards, or overcharge, or pad the bills and what have you. Ghost employees, where you've got a resort complex with hundreds of staff, perhaps thousands of staff on shifts and what have you, but you might be paying for another 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 people that don't actually exist.
So this is protecting the one that's owning the business.
Correct. Yeah. Going in and sort of looking at the books and records and really looking for instances where the numbers just don't stack up.
You have to keep in mind also with currency manipulation. That's another very important topic, where they're manipulating the currency.
Come back with that. We've got about a minute and 20 seconds before we have to go to break, but I also want to learn some of the success stories they've had and some of the things they've accomplished since they've been in business, and particularly any success stories.
I'd like to hear about any corruption that they've detected that was a big benefit to the client that we come back to.
You'll have to wait till I get my question answered, and then you can have your question answered, okay? Because I asked first.
If you asked first. Well, we were wearing purple, so red prevails.
Whatever. We are with Zaid Sultan and Mr. Brad Fabo with Censere, and that's Censere.com, Censere.com, Censere. See, that's the other
His
eye.
It's
.com. You'll find everything you want to know there. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show on the SBT Magazine Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Paul Marcus, owner of Affordable Searches, your premier investigation company specializing in comprehensive background checks nationwide. Business owners know one of the most important things to do is the hiring of employees. However, if you make mistakes or you don't check them out thoroughly, this could lead to problems. Some of the problems may be unsafe business environment, possible violence in the workplace, negligent hiring, lawsuits, and a turnover of employees. Our website has a wealth of information for you to read and learn how to run the correct background checks. We are also available for free consultations at 1-877-685-6691. Visit our testimonials page to see what our current customers say about us.
And welcome back to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show on the SBT Magazine Radio Network. Before we go any further, we want to thank Mr. Jerome Davis here with a cold under duress.
Engineer extraordinaire.
Mr. Ron Coleman, MovieWhip.com, who provides our video footage after the show within 24 to 48 hours. High-definition YouTube video, puts in our commercials.
And he's an SEO specialist and all those things, and not just videography, film, and whole movie production crew.
Right.
And we want to thank Tony Now and AudioShopper.biz. Right. And
Paul Marcus, AffordableSearches.com, if you need to do a background search. And he's very, very thorough. So if you're ever needing something like that, he's here in Houston, but he can do it worldwide. It's phenomenal.
And Craig Klein with Sales Nexus, the CRM, and that'll be our next issue.
That's right.
They might change the notes of Volume 1 issue, whatever, and forget the month. But we also want to give a shout out to the Houston Metropolitan Chamber, where we met Zed and Peggy with the chamber, amazing chamber. We're really looking forward to doing more work with them after we got the story done. What's so special about the chamber? I know why it's special to me.
I will say this: when I first moved here last year, I was looking for a place to, park my hat in terms of networking, finding local business contacts, and it was actually during our holy month of Ramadan where I met Peggy and Dr. Scuria, and they were at an event outside in Sugarland, and they were very hospitable, and they talked about the chamber, so I got involved from my previous firm, and then it continued.
And all
with
of a sudden you're in
Censere.
charge.
And they made me in
Don't
charge of
volunteer
it.
like
Yeah.
Charge the whole thing.
But no, it's a fantastic group of people. We have over 300 members servicing the 610 Loop area from Galleria down to downtown. I do want to do a quick plug that we are now in the beginning phases of our annual golf tournament planning.
That March?
That's going to be either end of March, early April.
Okay.
And we're
She's
forming the
already
committee
dressed for
now.
it right now.
We're doing that all now. So, yep, I'm dressed for it. Well,
No, Steve's dressed for it.
Well, he's going to be a vital
Yeah, he just
instrumental
came.
player.
He just came
there.
from a golf
Women's
tournament.
Business Enterprise Alliance at Sweetwater Country Club. We were
Exactly.
sponsors of not only some of the silent auction items, but also the golf clinic, which I should have gone to instead of played.
I think so.
And I was just telling Brett earlier today at lunch that we'll hope to have him back around March when Houston is jumping with the rodeo.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it's a great experience.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful.
You'll love it. It's just so much fun.
But you also have an event with the emerging entrepreneurs,
The Emerging Leaders Council.
right?
Right.
And that's with Dustin, and we're going to do a replay of Dustin's show on Wednesday.
Dustin O'Quinn.
The time slot, Dustin
who's
O'Quinn,
the chair of
O'Quinn Law
the
Firm.
Emerging Leaders Council for the Metro
And I
Chamber.
don't remember the name of the brewery, but I think that's October the 8th, I believe.
Right. It's next week.
Next week. So
No, and he's doing a fantastic job in inviting young professionals throughout Houston to get involved with the local businesses, and we're planning for next year to expand that agenda to invite business leaders in Houston to provide guidance to these.
there's some
young-
great groups,
Yeah, I know.
interest groups.
I still want to get back to talking about the maybe something that you feel really proud of and fraud wise that maybe you've detected for a client and stopped something terrible happening. Is there one particular that comes to mind without naming a name?
Yeah,
No,
well,
we-
we have
we-
to be very careful
Yeah,
because
of
there,
course.
this is an important point because it's such a delicate topic when you talk about fraud and detecting fraud.
Yeah.
It's never a pleasant discovery, to say
No.
the least. I mean, it's out of some sort of a whistleblower's good intention, or maybe it's something in the news. I'll answer this by saying that we've been hired in some of our major engagements to kind of look at their compliance to prevent fraud. So we've been actually working towards helping companies strengthen their internal controls from preventing any sort of behavior that's like that. Historically, our group of in the forensics has worked on some of the most comprehensive fraud cases in the world, namely Siemens, which is now a publicly disclosed FC. It's the benchmark of FCPA cases, over $2 billion worth of fines given to that company. And our group has also worked in some very high-profile cases, like in reconstruction in Iraq that the government was doing after the war, as well as UN's Oil for Food program. So we've touched some very elaborate and high-profile fraud cases. But for Censere, since we are growing this, we've had some very good cases that have more or less been by companies to strengthen their internal controls from preventing fraud.
Without naming names, is there an example of something that you've seen more commonly happening that people need to be more aware of in their own business?
Well, number one, when it comes to an FCPA type of an issue, training and making local country managers aware of what the violations may or may not be is number one. I mean, we find that locally, the local staff, because they're not American, usually they're not brought up in that background of knowledge, they go through a training, but it's more like to check the box, and they don't really understand the nature of the violation or what could possibly occur from that violation. So training is number one. Number two is a thorough due diligence of partners that they're doing work with in country. In other words, you were talking about the example earlier with doing business in Russia. Usually some of these Western companies will have a partner in country. What we find is that there's not enough due diligence or background information on those joint ventures in country.
One example of that I can speak to, obviously without names. We had a case recently, actually for a New Zealand-based firm which was operating in China, they had existing operations there, and they were looking to expand their operations, and looking to bring in another investor to enable them to, I guess, act on the expansion plans. And they engaged us initially to do some background due diligence on the potential investor. And it was, we were told, okay, this is the fellow behind it, but he's going to invest in this particular business through his wife. His wife would make the investment. So we had 2 names to go and look at. And our initial investigation turned up someone with the same name as the husband, who had just come out of prison several months previously for bribery and corruption. He'd served a 5-year term in prison for that. So for us, the first red flag is, if he's the one with the money, why is he investing through his wife?
Exactly.
Why wouldn't he be investing in his own name?
Right.
And we went back to our client with this, and we said, well, we think we've actually found a bit of a deal killer on this one. This fellow has just come out of prison a couple of months ago. It's up to you, but he was in prison for bribery and corruption charges. Is that the sort of person you really want to be a key investor in your business in China? And the response we got was interesting. A lot of people sort of, they don't believe the results. So the response was, oh, when we met him a few weeks ago, he didn't look like someone who's just got out of prison.
What do they look like?
Well, exactly. He'd actually managed to change out of his orange jumpsuit by then. So I'm not entirely certain what he meant by that, but we were sure it was the same individual. We'd done all the background checks and what have you. And we have to be very careful what we can look for in China. Every country has different rules and regulations around what sort of background information you can legally obtain. So obviously we're very mindful of that, and in each country there's different levels or different standards of what can be done. And we were very, very confident based on what we had that it was the same individual. But our client basically said, no, we don't think it's him. It didn't look like someone who's just got out of prison. And we don't think we'll be needing you to actually go on to the next level of due diligence. So whether that means they took our advice and they ran, or whether they simply want to perhaps gloss over this particular crack in the pavement.
Sounds like they really wanted the investment and didn't care.
Yeah, perhaps. I guess there's often egos involved in investment, and no one wants to see a deal scuppered, but if ever a deal should be scuppered, I think that's a pretty good reason.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to bed with somebody that doesn't have a great background.
Exactly. So that was one example, perhaps. But, I mean, on pretty much every occasion, and actually what Zaid sort of touched on in terms of training is quite important, because that's a key aspect of FCPA, I guess, implementation. And you have to be careful that you don't conduct training and then just not do it again. Because people come, people go. You've got new people coming into an organisation, so they need to be inducted into the system. But also, it doesn't necessarily take. If the local employees don't have the same understanding for what's right and what's wrong and what have you, then fine. They go to the training and they might accept that, and they'll work according to the
guidelines,
the procedures and guidelines and policies, and then they start to revert perhaps to what they've historically done. So there is a need to stay on top of this and actually conduct regular training sessions.
How often?
Refresher sessions. It depends on the country, and it depends on the level of the employees that are being trained.
I will say that every company will have at least an annual FCPA training program. The problem becomes that there's no follow-up afterwards.
Right.
And that's where the internal audit program within the company has to be actively involved, where they're following up, doing reviews, asking questions. The other thing that a company needs to have is an effective whistleblowing hotline. In other words, you have to have the ability for somebody to call an anonymous line to say, hey, you should take a look at what's going on in China, because we think it's going to affect the company if somebody finds out. But at least once a year, you have to do an FCPA training program to have what we call an at least the baseline of an FCPA. Sometimes they do it twice a year. When we were at Big Four in Deloitte, we did it once in the earlier part of the year, but then we did another type of it in the end of the year, just to make sure that we understood. And then there was obviously local laws that we have to be aware of in the United States, particularly in Washington. We had to make sure that we weren't actively donating or lobbying without having the appropriate license.
Yep.
To do so.
When you're dealing with somebody's company in another country, Taiwan, for example, do you have people that are doing these programs in their language?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's, I think, one of the very strong points for Censere is that we're across 15 locations, and we probably speak 20 or 30 languages across the group. So we've got local staff in every location, and pretty much everyone in the group is at least bilingual or trilingual or better. I'm probably one of the most linguistically challenged people in the group.
And yet he speaks three
I speak moderately good English, and I speak reasonably good Mandarin, some Cantonese, a little bit of Korean and Thai.
Yeah.
I can read Chinese, I can read Korean. I've never managed to learn how to read Thai, though. My wife, who's in the business, speaks 4 dialects of Chinese, Vietnamese, English, and some Japanese. So we pride ourselves on actually employing and having a very strong local employee base. I think it's very important to grow the local resources, and that's our way of giving back to the community. We don't just want to be a company full of expatriates and sort of imposing, I guess, our will on local people. We try and bring our local people through and train them, and we want to see them grow and become contributors to society in general.
Let me ask, what are your plans for the next, say, 5 years? Where do you want to be?
Personally, I'd like to be on a beach somewhere, but
take us with you.
I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon.
Okay.
We've recently expanded into the United States, so it's our first foray outside of Asia. And we certainly see that growing actually quite quickly. We see very good opportunities here in Houston and generally across the US. Opportunities to strengthen existing relationships we have with US clients and companies that we're working for in Asia, but able to actually, I guess, liaise with them and build that relationship here at home. And also working for Asian firms who are looking to invest in the US as well. So certainly we do anticipate good growth in our US operations over the next few years. We're still growing in Asia. It's a huge region, and there's, we don't have much of a presence in South Asia at this point, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. The only office we have in South Asia is in the Maldives, which is probably the smallest, if not one of the smallest of the South Asian nations.
I'm trying to convince Brett to let me go there a few times a year.
Right.
Will Zaid play a major role with as you expand through the U.S.?
Well, certainly. That's our plan. And he is responsible for helping us develop our presence here in the U.S. And we plan on having him come out to Asia with us as well and sort of obviously meet our clients there. And we'll have people from Asia up here as well to sort of meet U.S. clients. So, as I say, we're 15 offices, but it's very much a single platform across 15 locations. So our people are very mobile.
Wonderful.
I think we're going to have him come back to do a whole nother show about stuff we didn't ask him.
I know. There's a whole bunch of things I wanted to ask.
I know.
Well, but you keep dominating the conversation, so I don't get to... No.
We've only touched on half our business.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We've got to have you
We
back.
got to do the other half.
My side of the business, which is actually not the forensic side, is more on the appraisal side. So valuation of businesses,
Yes.
Valuation of intellectual property, property, plant and equipment, and associated due diligence.
How soon do you think you're going to come back?
Well, rodeo's in March, I believe,
Yeah.
so
get him back
I'd
to
love
the
to be
road.
back here for that.
Okay.
And I'll have a cowboy hat waiting for him.
All right.
And the boots.
And the boots,
And the
of course.
boots. There
That's
you
right.
go.
I look forward to it.
Wonderful.
Great show. And again, the website is
SERE.com, right?
That's
Tell
the
you
one.
everything you want to know according to Zaid. So
That's right.
It's all there, and doesn't want to give out his home phone number at this point. But
I think his wife would be a little
I
offended.
think so too. She's a lovely lady.
I just want to say hi to them and my 2 girls.
There you go. There you go. And Miss
Do your
Leon-
wife say ni hao?
My wife is listening in from Hong Kong at the moment. It's
All
about
right.
5 in the morning. Actually, it's probably coming up to 6 in the morning now. But she'll be listening
Barbara's
to this.
still up at that hour.
Yes, so I'll say ni hao, ni hao.
Day.
There'll be an audio link to this show. Anybody missed it on Small Business Today Magazine Facebook page in, I'd say, within the next 5 or 10 minutes. And then the YouTube video will be up within 24 to 48 hours, thanks to Ron Coleman. on Small Business Today, Premier Agent Magazine, through Hootsuite, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the social media that we use to promote the show. Been a great show, wonderful. And we thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to Small Business Today Magazine Talk Show on the SBT Magazine Radio Network.